They never believed your disappearance was final. In their mind, you were just quiet, not gone. They assumed silence meant hesitation, that distance was only a pause before familiarity pulled you back into orbit. What dismantled them wasn't anger, it was your indifference. Not coldness, not bitterness, indifference, the kind that doesn't flinch. They expected your absence to ache. Instead, it settled. They told themselves you'd return once the noise faded, once nostalgia softened your resolve, once loneliness did its work. They didn't realize loneliness stopped being louder than peace. And that's where their ego began to bleed. Because the truth is this: you didn't vanish to punish them. You disappeared because you finally recognized yourself. They didn't lose you when you left. They lost you when you stopped checking whether your leaving mattered. That's the wound they can't name. Your silence didn't ask to be understood. It stood complete, no explanation required. They kept waiting for your absence to feel temporary, like a door left ajar. They didn't see that you closed it gently, deliberately, without drama. Not slammed, not locked, closed. Distance was supposed to weaken you. Instead, it clarified you. They expected time to turn you soft, to blur your edges, to make memory louder than self-respect. But time didn't erode your decision, it reinforced it. Every quiet day strengthened the boundary. They believed your worth lived in their recognition of it. What unsettled them was realizing your worth no longer needed an audience. That's when rejection set in, not because you left, but because you never returned to renegotiate your dignity. You carried it forward intact. They thought longing would make you flexible again. They underestimated how anchoring peace can be when someone finally finds it. They assumed love would outrank limits. They didn't anticipate the moment your limits outranked everything else. And that moment changed gravity. Your silence doesn't ache for them. It doesn't reach. It doesn't call their name. It breathes without them. That's what unsettles them most. Your independence didn't arrive loudly. It didn't announce itself with explanations or emotional displays. It arrived steady. And steadiness terrifies people who rely on reaction. They thought you needed closure through their understanding. They never considered closure could arrive through self-recognition. You didn't stop trying to be understood because you were bitter. You stopped because you were finished. That distinction matters. They expected your memory to soften into regret. Instead, it matured into discernment. They told themselves habit would pull you back. They didn't realize you changed what home meant. Growth didn't include them. Your future stopped reserving space for their past. They hoped loneliness would send you searching. They didn't see that solitude became quieter than staying ever was. They assumed history had weight. They didn't account for self-respect rewriting gravity entirely. They feel rejected because your worth didn't collapse without them. It expanded. They thought your leaving was emotional. They didn't expect it to be principled, rooted not in pain, but in clarity. Your return would have meant they still held authority over your emotional state.
Your absence stripped that authority away. They waited for time to soften you. Instead, time sharpened you. They feel rejected because you broke the unspoken agreement to always come back. You didn't do it with malice. You did it with certainty. They believed explanation would reopen the door. They didn't realize explanation is unnecessary where conviction lives. They feel rejected because you didn't need a villain to justify your leaving. You didn't frame yourself as wounded. You simply chose yourself. Once, they thought your staying proved loyalty. They never considered your leaving would become the truest proof of loyalty to your own life. You chose yourself without apology. That choice exposes every place they expected you to shrink. They assumed your heart would override your standards again. They didn't expect your standards to finally protect your heart. Your future stopped narrating their relevance. They became context, not consequence. They believed your return was inevitable. They didn't prepare for permanence. You didn't come back broken. You came back whole internally. They wanted your departure to hurt you more than it hurt them. What unsettles them is realizing it healed you. They expected regret. You gave resolution. They imagined collapse. It became construction. You didn't choose distance as punishment. You chose it as alignment. And this is the truth that settles into the silence they can't escape. You didn't leave to teach them a lesson. You left because you learned one. You didn't leave because you hated them. You left because you finally respected yourself. You didn't return because your worth was no longer negotiable. They still measure value by who comes back. You measure value by who you no longer abandon yourself for. That's why your leaving became permanent. Not because they were unlovable, but because you became unavailable to anything that required you to be smaller than your worth. They keep waiting for the version of you who doubted themselves. They don't realize that version dissolved the moment you chose yourself without hesitation. They feel rejected because you didn't upgrade your life with them still attached. You redesigned the entire structure. No shadows preserved, no old blueprints honored. Your healing didn't require their apology. It didn't wait for their growth. It didn't need their acknowledgement. You healed without their participation. They thought your silence meant struggle. They didn't accept that silence can also mean effortlessness. Your peace doesn't wobble. When memory tries to re-enter, it meets something solid, not hostility, not emotion, but boundary. Carved, set. They assumed your identity revolved around them. What shattered them was discovering you had an identity that thrived without reference. Your strength looks natural now, not forced, not performative. That scares them because it fits you too well. They thought love defined you. They didn't expect self-respect to redefine everything. Your absence has weight, not emptiness. Intention, not longing. Nostalgia no longer pulls you backward. It feels foreign inside the life you built forward. You didn't replace them with another version of the same pattern. You replaced the pattern itself. They expected loud grief. You grieved quietly and finished early. They can't reach you emotionally anymore to confirm their importance. Your inaccessibility rewrote their role. They thought return was a matter of timing. They didn't understand it was a matter of standards. Your confidence no longer seeks permission. It stands alone. Once, they believed your worth depended on how deeply you loved them. Now your worth depends on how deeply you protect yourself. Your life stopped referencing them entirely. You moved from reaction into direction. They assumed your leaving was impulsive. They didn't realize it was the most deliberate decision you ever made. You didn't come back in pieces. You came back integrated. They thought your strength would fade. They didn't expect it to become baseline. And this is where the truth locks into place, beyond doubt, beyond reversal.